Okay, so it says we are streaming. Everything's green. It says we're started. So yeah, I guess we're ready to jump right in. I'm gonna wait a couple seconds just to let some people get into the chat. Make sure everything is recording. It looks like it's recording. Okay, make sure I can see the chat. All right. Okay, so welcome back everyone. This is our second Tuesday talk, which means every week we'll be meeting on Tuesday and just taking some time to chat, to build community, to share skills, to learn about each other, to learn about different topics within art, spirituality, and healing. So today I am going to be talking a lot about some of the same things that I talked about last week, but we're going to be taking them a little bit further. So I'm going to give it just a second to see if any people are going to show up in the chat immediately, but we are going to jump right in. So basically the plan for today is first we're going to start with week two's insights. So for each month I'm posting an early part of the month and a late part of the month. I'm posting insights so that you can know what kind of energies are going to be coming up, what kinds of challenges are going to be coming up, what kinds of questions to ask, what kinds of things to be practicing and be mindful of. So we'll be going over week two of that because we're going to meet each week on Tuesday and have this space to chat. So I thought it's a really great time to talk about what energies are available each week. So that's what we'll be doing today for week two. Then we're going to move on to talking about beginner's tarot, which is what's going to take up most of the time today. And we're going to talk about the second part of the blog series. So in the first part of the blog series, which I posted last week, we talked about the very, very basics of getting to know the cards, how to choose a deck, how to set your intentions for what you'll be learning, all that kind of thing. So that's where we started. And in part two of the Beginner's Tarot, we talked a little bit more about how do I interpret the cards. So once I actually have some cards in front of me, how do I set up a reading? Once I have a reading set up and a spread, then how do I begin to interpret the cards that are showing up? How do I begin to interpret the cards when there are multiple of them? So those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. And if at any point you have any questions, please post them in the chat. And if you're watching this as the recorded version, please post them in the comments section below the video. And we definitely want to engage. So I'll be there answering any questions that I can and hopefully engaging the curiosities and other thoughts that you have while we're going through this. So that's part two. So we're starting with the insights. We're moving on to the part two of Beginner's Tarot. And then thirdly, we're going to have some practice space. And this is because part two really covers a lot of the practical aspects of reading tarot. So I want to give some space to actually practice, so to use some actual questions. So if you're watching right now and you're thinking, well, maybe I could share a question of something in my life, or I could share some concern that I've been wondering about, then we can actually do a reading here. And that will help all of us learn a little bit about how to walk through a reading, how to start pulling cards, how to set up a spread, and how to actually interpret them in the context of your question. So if you're watching and you think that you might be open to that, maybe think for a second about what question you might want to share. And if you are watching this as a recorded version, again, just comment below. I will still go back and make sure to engage there. I want people to be able to learn. I want people to be able to process together and to feel together. And so I'm just really hoping this will be a healing and learning space for everyone. So that's the plan. And if you are in the chat and you can hear me, please let me know that you can hear me, because sometimes the audio, let me check that one more time before we start. So it looks like that's working. So I'm just going to move ahead with the idea that it is working. So the first part, week two's insights. Now this is posted below in the video description. You can see I wrote a little bit about the video, and below there's actually a link to the blog which talks about the astroscopes for early August. So you can go ahead and click that. You can read that right now if you want to, but we're going to go over it a little bit. I already have it pulled up here, so we can go through that. So in week one, we had a card come up which was wheat. Now, we already talked about this last week, so if you're not sure about going in depth with this, I'm kind of just going to go over a summary today. So if you're unsure about these, you can definitely go back to last week and check those out. Excuse me. So yeah, we're starting with wheat. And what wheat really represented was for week 1. So that's week 1 of early August. It's week 1 of August. And really there, wheat talks about remaining devoted to our intentions and really staying focused on what we know we should be doing and the things in our values and the things that we have committed ourselves to, just really remaining focused in those things. So that was for week 1. That's how August was opening up. That's the energies that we were having come to us first in August. So a lot of questions of, am I devoted to what I say I'm devoted to? Am I following through on my words? And do my actions align with my values? That kind of thing is what we were challenged to look at in the first part of August. Now we are at week 2 of August, and the question changes a little bit. So here we have Hol Yin, or the new moon. So you can see it's the new moon. It's completely dark. It's on the opposite side of the cycle as the whole moon. What do we call that? The full moon? I guess that's what other people call it, the full moon. But the new moon here represents week 2's energy. So this is what's coming up right now. This is what we're dealing with in the second week, as we're moving through the second week, as we're moving out of the second week. These are the themes that we're looking at. And really, the point of what this shared with us when I first wrote about this, and again, this is posted as a blog, so you can read about this, the link's in the description. Really what this talked about is potential. It's talked about the idea that whatever we put into our intentions, and make sure I have the card here, whatever we put into our intentions is going to be multiplied. Whatever we put into our intentions is going to grow and flourish. And so just really making sure that the things we say we want are actually in our intention, that we're putting our actions towards it, that we are making time to really be with that intention and to practice and to feel and to just really stay reflecting on that intention so that it multiplies into the things that we desire. And part of what I mentioned last week is that actually the things, if we don't check in on it, the things that we maybe are hoping not to manifest, the things we're hoping not to have multiply in our lives, the things that are rough that we're experiencing, those will also multiply if that's what we're honoring. So right now, that's kind of the sense that we got with both of these cards, with week 1 and week 2. And now we're moving to week 2 and getting ready to transition out of it. We really need to be looking at intentions. In this deck, just to get some concept behind it, this is, so for this type of card where it has a planet and a sign, there are 36 of those. For the moon phases, like this is the new moon phase, there are 12 of those in this deck. So they tend to represent larger events, larger patterns, larger forces of energy that are moving. So this is really a critical thing for us to look at. It's not something mundane. This is something that is really calling on our attention in the second week of August. So as we're moving into the second week of August, we really want to make sure that we're staying focused in our intention. We want to make sure that we are just honoring what we say we're honoring, making sure that what we're doing really is aligned with what we want long term, because that's really going to manifest this week. If you're not already seeing it, then that's what's going to come up. Hopefully you've already started working with your intention, so you don't have anything too much to worry about. And you're definitely welcome to grow whatever you choose to grow, but know that whatever you choose right now is going to be multiplied. So hopefully that's something that you've got in order, or you can get in order this week, and feel confident moving forward. So that's what we had for week 2. And that's why I wanted to revisit this, because each week as we're here with the Tuesday talk, we are looking at the different energies that are coming up. And they shift each week. Each week I'm going to get a little bit more insight into what these mean. Each week I want to be able to share that with you, because your situation is going to change as the days change, right? So I want to make sure that this is something that's useful to you. So the theme here for week 2 is make sure that you've got your intentions in order. Now, there is a third card, which is what I'm going to pull for every single one of these astroscope readings. There will be 3 main cards and then cards for each of the signs. I'm not going to go through the signs today. That took a very long time last time, and if you want to know about that, that should stay pretty stable. So you can check out last week's video for that. There's also a Tuesday talk where I talked about all the signs. Or you can just read the article. Either way, you have access to that info if you want to check that out. So for the 3 cards that apply to everyone, let's make sure the chat's clear. Okay. So for the central message, that's the 3rd card. So we had week 1, week 2, and then we have a central message. And the central message just helps us understand how everything fits together. So for the first half of August, what are we really trying to learn? What's really going on energetically, and what do we have access to? And what we have here first is dust. I'm pretty sure this is how it came up. So the concept behind dust, so we're just talking about intention, and we're talking about really reaping what you sow and really making sure to stay focused in your intentions. The reason why behind all of that is the central message. It's a question, and the question that dust, this is the name of this card, dust, Pluto in Pisces, dust. Dust asks us to consider things across time. So what's going to last and what's not going to last. That's what this brings to us. So when we're thinking about our intentions and honoring them with our actions and multiplying the potentials of what we're putting our energies into, the reason why that's important is because right now there are some things that may seem maybe presenting themselves to you, but they're actually not going to last. And so right now this card comes up as a reminder of the importance of being vigilant, the importance of being able to discern between what's going to stay and what's going to fade away. So that's really the question that this card brings up for us. And again, I talked about that a little bit more in the last week's video, and there's the article. So if you want to know more about that, you can comment right now in the chat even. I want to make sure that these cards are understandable for anyone who's watching. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. It can even be helpful if you're watching this after the week has passed. It can be helpful to understand what's going on with the cards because these represent the energies that we did have access to, and they can help us understand why certain things played out the way they did. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. That's what I'm here for, and I'd be happy to go through these concepts more thoroughly. So yeah, if you have any questions, post them in the chat or in the comment section below. So that's what I wanted to do first, is just go through the week 2's insights and make sure that you understand that the energy is shifting from a week kind of energy where the focus is on where's your devotion, where is your practice, where is your, that kind of thing, moving towards the importance of intention. So that's how the energy is shifting. I want to make sure that you understood that. And now what I want to go through is part 2 of the Beginner's Tarot blog series. So I've been really excited writing these. Actually, let me just adjust my chair. When I wrote these both first, I didn't intend for them to be 2 different things. So I intended for it to be one article going through literally how do you start day 1 working with the tarot. How do I pick out a deck? How do I start using it immediately? How do I learn the cards? And as I was writing, I realized that it was just getting to be too long, like that I really wanted to go in depth with sharing these things with you. And so I made the choice to break it into 2 parts, and I just felt like that made more sense. So there's a part 1 to the blog series is what I'm saying, and there's a part 2 which I posted this week. If you haven't had a chance to read that, no worries, we're going to go through it right now, though you also can read it at any point if you want to take a different format to that learning. So I'm going to pull that up right now. If you're watching, I suggest that you do the same so you can sort of see what I'm seeing, though I also have the cards here, so really it's up to you. Yeah, and again, I'm moving quickly because I want to make sure that these videos don't get to be too long, but if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I would take the time to pause and really go through your question and make sure that everything is intelligible. So don't hesitate to ask. So we have this article. It's posted in the description, just like the astroscopes. So if you have that pulled up, or if you don't, that's what we're going to go through now. So my aim with this beginner's tarot series was to share with you an art that has really changed my life, something that's really changed my life, something that really has come to be such a central part of my healing process, something I trust more than pretty much any other art. Um, Let me make sure this is not on. Yeah, so it's just tarot has come to mean so much to me, and I really wanted to share it with others because I think there's this perception that tarot is something that you have to be this mystical psychic in a dark room with I don't know, a crystal ball or whatever. Maybe people just feel intimidated by how many cards there are or the tradition behind it, but I wanted to help everyone see that tarot is really accessible, and the way it came to me is kind of a really funny story, which I talked about last week, so I'm not going to go through that again. You can check that out if you're curious. Um, but I didn't really see myself as someone who would be able to read tarot, or I just didn't see myself as a tarot reader. And until I picked up the cards, and when I started working with them, I realized like, wow, this is really impactful. This is something that every time I work with someone, they share with me that they haven't really explored something before, or they haven't been able to find the answers until that moment. So I really just wanted to bring together a tangible collective resource for you to be able to start with tarot from literally the very beginning with absolutely no knowledge of the tarot. Though most of us do have knowledge culturally of what tarot is, at least. So that's what my intention was going through this. And in the first part, what I did was go through the actual cards. So I first talked about how do we set our intentions, how do we know why do I want to learn tarot, and how do I remind myself of that when I'm losing motivation, or how do I let that guide me in the choices I make in my learning journey. So we started with that. Then we talked about choosing a deck. So choosing a deck meant looking at the art style and saying, do I want something more busy? Do I want something light? Do I want something really dark? Do I want something that has all of the details packed into one card? Or do I want something very minimalistic, which really symbolizes the imagery? So talking about that, talking about the portability and how do we want the borders and what kind of price do I want to pay? So that's the second part of what we talked about there. Then we went through in depth, and this was the biggest part of the article, um, talking through the structure of tarot. So there's 78 cards, but as you will know if you watched last week, it's not just 78 cards that you have to memorize each one. They actually are organized into 3 different structures, like the minor arcana, the major arcana, and the court cards. And these structures are consistent across all tarot decks. Nearly all of them use this structure. That's what makes tarot such a strong tradition. And so that also helps you as a beginner, as a learner, helps me also to continue learning the depths of the cards. So that's what we went through in the first part of this blog series. And we kind of stopped there because it was a lot of information, and I wanted to make sure that people had time to understand that before diving into something else. So now is the something else that we're diving into. So in the second part of this series, I wanted to help us learn how to put a spread together. How do I actually start a reading? So not just individual cards that are really pretty and theoretically have meanings, but how do they all fit together when I'm trying to get a reading together, when I have a question and I want answers? How do I arrive at that? So I have the article pulled up now. I would suggest you do the same if you're watching, so you can just see kind of the structure that I'm going through. But the first thing I talked about was crafting a spread. So when you first start working with tarot in a practical way, you may be like, I don't even know what a spread is. Is that like, maybe you think of butter, maybe you think of a tablecloth, I don't know, if you're from the South. But What a spread is really an arrangement of how the cards are positioned in a reading. So if it's basically saying like there's a question A, there's a question B, there's a question C, and I'm gonna just insert cards into those question slots and get an answer. That's what a spread is in the most like direct terms. In more abstract terms, it's really about asking, yeah, how do I tell a story? So what questions do I need to ask in order to paint this picture, to bring all the details together? Um, and that may sound kind of abstract now, or it may not be helpful um, in knowing how to actually interpret the cards. So we're going to go through the practice of that live here. And I encourage you to really engage, to be looking at the article, to be thinking about the cards with me, or whatever form that you need to engage, because the more that you engage with the concepts and the illustrations in the cards without relying on someone to tell you what it means, the more you'll be able to trust yourself, the more you'll activate your own intuitive process. And really, tarot is an illustrated art, it's imagery. It's not a bunch of text on a screen. It's not, there's lots of oracles that work that way. The tradition of tarot was built through imagery. So you have access to a lot of the same tradition that I have access to. So, okay. So it says there was a disconnect. I'm not really sure. I'm going to continue because it says it's green still. So hopefully that wasn't too much of a problem. I'm going to take a moment to drink something real fast. Let's see. Okay, so basically, the point behind having a spread in tarot, okay, well, why can't I just pull cards and put them down? You can. What happens a lot when I look at how others who are just beginning, how they read, and when I look at how I used to read when I first started, I did just pull cards a lot of the time. I would just go take a card, just plop it down, say, oh, I don't understand what this means. Or I plop it down, and it was more difficult to read in that way because I didn't have direction. So really the role of the spread is to help you find that direction. Every single time that you pull a card, you should already have in mind or in heart a question that you want the card to respond to, because every card you pull, it's not just, they don't just sit around, but they will just sit around if you pull without a question. They'll sort of blend together. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's very confusing as a reader. If I just start pushing cards onto the table, I won't understand what they're saying because I didn't ask them how to share with me. I didn't ask them a question to respond to. So a spread really helps to make sure that every single card that you put down, you know why it's there, you know what it's responding to, you know what it's contributing to the reading, and that just helps you get a lot more clarity um, as you are reading the tarot. So there are all kinds of different spreads that people will post online. Um, if you see my face right now, I don't usually work with those. No tea, no shade to people who do use them. It's just not my vibe. I really like to get into, I appreciate the opportunity to get into in depth with the cards and really make sure, I have so many burps, really make sure that I understand why each of the cards are showing up in the reading. And the way that I do that is by making sure I'm asking my own questions. Sometimes when I started reading, I did use other people's spreads, and what I found was I was kind of disconnected from how they had the reading spread set up, and so um, I didn't understand what the purpose of each position in the reading was. So it just became a much more personal and meaningful experience when I started to build spreads from the ground up. So I actually have one today that I built from the ground up. It's small. I feel like it's more accessible than a lot of spreads. So I want to share that with you today and invite you to adjust it and to really work with me to understand why it exists the way it does, not just here's 4 cards that you put out and they mean this, but to really understand why they exist that way. Um, but yeah, just to give you an idea, so there are different types of spreads like the Celtic Cross. That's a super common spread. It has 10 cards in a very specific position. Some are like on the side, and then there's a cross, and they like talk about the past, the present, and the future, and the foundation of the situation. And it can, I just really haven't vibed with it. If that's something you vibe with, then definitely check that out. And maybe that structure can really support you. Maybe that tradition can really support you. I did link in the article to someone who talks about the Celtic Cross and how to use that. So that's accessible to you. And that's like super, that's a super tarot reader spread to use. A lot of people use that. It's a very traditional spread. Um, when I do my own readings, generally what I do is I craft my own spreads. Either I do it in the moment or I do it from something that I already made. But either way, I make sure that it's my own spread. That's just really important to me. And I linked in the article again to another article I wrote about how I pull cards during a reading. And I call it like a tree, kind of a tree flow, because I just pull branches. I start with the root of what I'm looking at, and I ask a central question, and then I build off of that, and I pull more cards as I need more specific responses to that. I'm gonna check the chat real fast. Okay, so what I'm saying is there's lots of options. Whatever you want to do with your spreads, how you want to learn, there's someone out there who has done it that way, most likely, or done something similar, and you can start from that place. You can start, there's always assistance for whatever kind of learning you want to do. But I'm going to walk you through one today. I'm just going to get there. I'm going to make sure I touch on everything. So I haven't named this spread because I don't know, I don't know. I guess that helps me feel like it's more alive or something. I don't really know why I haven't. But basically the way this spread works is I'm going to pull 4 cards. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you look at the article, you can see them laid out on a table, which helps you get a better idea of them as positions. So there's a first position, there's a second position, there's a third position, and a fourth position. And every time I use this spread, those positions are going to mean the same thing. They're going to ask the same question. So the way this one works is each of these, there's 4 of these, and if you notice what we talked about last week and what we talked about in part 1 of this blog series, is there's 4 elements in tarot also. There's 4 elements in how the cards are divided up in the minor and the court cards. So that's how we're going to set this up. So the first card is actually going to represent fire. And if you think back, so you should pause here if you're thinking on, well, what could fire represent? We talked about it last week and we talked about it in the first part of the article. So maybe pause here and think, what does fire represent as a position? What would that want to talk about? So for each of these elements, maybe pause and think about it. The first one is fire. And what that's going to talk about is opportunity. It's going to talk about vital energy. It's going to talk about passion. It's going to talk about a sense of urgency or force or just life. That kind of life force is what the fire position is going to talk about. And I'm going to go through the other ones before I talk about them as a whole. So the next card is going to talk, let me make sure I keep these in order. It doesn't matter yet. The next card is going to talk about earth. So when I hold this position, I'm saying when I pull a card for this position, I want it to tell me about resources. I want it to tell me about material reality and facts. I want it to tell me about the foundation of a situation, what's stable, what's consistent, things with money, things with work. That's what I want this card to talk about. And the way this reading is set up is kind of like a general check-in reading. You can use it for specific questions, and that's kind of the structure we're going to use. But most often I use this as a general check-in just to see what's going on in the week, in the month, in my life, that kind of thing. So we have a fire card, we have an earth card. Third, we have an air card. Now when I pulled this one, what do you think that would talk about? So going from what I shared last week and in the article, again, both are accessible resources. This is going to talk about communication. This is going to talk about ideas. This is going to talk about thoughts. This is going to talk about day-to-day interactions with people and the chatter. What's the gossip? It's going to talk about information. That's what this is going to talk about. It can also talk about conflict, so we'll leave that potential up as well. And then last we have water. So water is going to talk about emotions. It's going to talk about deeper feeling and deeper needs. It's going to talk about spirituality, artistic expression. It's going to talk about relationship connections. That's a wide range of things, right? But we're asking this card to, when we use it in a general sense, we're asking it, hey, what can you share with me that's in this realm of topics that could help me thrive more, that could help me get to where I'm trying to go, or be the person that I'm wanting to be, or honor my practice? What can water teach me about that? So it really does leave a lot of space for the reading to bring something forward to you. Okay, so that's what we have there. And I wrote this out in the article. We have the structure. So we have fire for one card, earth for the second card, air for the third, and we have water for the fourth card. So when I pull these four cards, when I say, oh, I'm using this elemental spread, every time, it doesn't matter what card shows up in whatever position, the positions will always ask the same question. And that's the role of a spread. The spread gives you structure so that you know what a card means. It's not just sitting there. It's not just, oh, this card just happened to come up and I'm not really sure how to interpret it. You always go back to the question. That's what I'm going to keep saying here. Go back to the question. And the question is set up as fire, earth, air, and water. So it's the same questions that I just went through. So always make sure to go back to your question when you're trying to interpret. So that might be a lot, right? So if you're watching this as recorded, I would encourage you to pause a second, take a moment, breathe, make sure you understand. And I'm actually going to take a sip of water so we can do the same live. Again, if you have questions, just post them in the chat. I would love to do a reading for someone live. I always offer one card readings when we're doing the live stream on Tarot Tuesdays. So, or sorry, Tuesday Talk. Just all these T words. During the Tuesday Talk, you can definitely ask for a one card reading if you feel open to sharing your deets with everyone. Y'all, I'm trying to stay hydrated. Trying to take care of this body by replenishing it with water. Okay, so yeah, if you're following in the article, you should see now we're moving on to the second part of the article, which is interpreting the cards. So when we're going to interpret the cards, we're going to go through individually each of the positions that we just defined. So we're going to go through the fire position. It's water. We're going to go through the earth position, the air position, and the water position. Excuse me, y'all. This water is giving me like hiccups or something. So yeah, now we're going to go through each of those positions, and we're going to do that together. Again, I challenge you, whether you're watching this live, whether you're watching it recorded, stop and think about what it is, or just to engage here, right? Really think about what I'm asking, think about what the cards are asking, think about how this could actually be insightful to your life. If you were pulling this card, what process would you go through to interpret it? So that's what we're going to do right now. And I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, so the first card we defined is what? What did we define in our spread first? We defined fire. So the first card that's going to show up is fire. So before I even pull a card, it's sitting there, it's face down. I usually leave them face down because it just makes the cards easier to read. When you get into a reading and you have 8 to 12 cards just sitting on the table and they're all face up at the same time, it's overwhelming. It still overwhelms me now. I don't do that. I always put them face down and I will flip them over as I'm asking them to come into the reading. I pull them all most of the time at the same time. Usually I pull them all at the same time, but I put them face down until I'm ready to work with them. So this card is face down, and as I'm getting ready to work with it, I will return to my question. So I'm going to ask this card. This is the fire position. So I say, fire, what can you contribute to my wellness, to my abundance? So if I'm asking about this reading, what does fire have to share with me about my passion, about my energies right now that are available, about opportunities that are available right now? So that's generally how you always return to your question, and you want to approach the cards with your question as you're flipping them. So I set up a context. This is important. Most of the time, you're not just doing general readings. Most of the time, you have a question, even if you don't know what it is, even if your client doesn't know what it is, the person you're working with doesn't know what the question exactly is, there's a question. And part of your work as a reader is helping to listen to what people are sharing, to what you're sharing, and to being able to sense a deeper question that ties everything together. So almost always you're reading in some sort of specific context. And the context that I set up for this reading was a relationship between two people, because that is usually what I'm reading for, is some sort of relationship. People always want to know about the relationships. It's the relationships and work. That's what people come looking for readings for most. So I'm saying then, if the context of the reading is relationship, I'm saying, what can this card position tell me? What do I need to know about passions, opportunity, and vital force, vital energy, just energy moving in this relationship? So that's how we approach the card, and now we're going to flip it. This is your first time maybe reading and interpreting a card, so we're going to flip it together. We're going to sit with it, and we're going to take a second to just absorb. What I want you to do is think about the imagery before anything, first of all. So let's go ahead and flip the cards. So if you are watching on the recorded way, go ahead and pause this and think about the card before we move in to interpreting it. But if you're watching live, then you can just do this with me live. So what is the card, first of all? Usually a tarot deck will tell you. Not all tarot decks do. I'll show you an example. This, for example, if you pulled this card out of this deck, it's more minimalistic. So it has the Roman numeral, but it's not going to tell you the suit or specifically what the name of the card is. But that's the first thing, is maybe you want to identify what the card is. And if you want to take a super intuitive approach to learning to read tarot, then you want to stop and think about what imagery is available here. So what do we have? We have 3 foxes. Importantly, we notice this one central rod, and it seems to be emanating some energy, right? So that's what I'm noticing first, is this rod, and I'm noticing these foxes and just that general sense of force. So that's the first thing that I would notice, is just the imagery. And you can take your time, sit with this, notice the colors. There's reds and oranges, yellows. What does that mean? What do reds and oranges and yellows feel like? To me, they feel like a vital force. They feel like life and warmth and fire. So in the fire position, which is the position 1 that we asked about, we have this card coming up, and it's a fire card too. So we already have an alignment there. We have a strengthening of that concept. So if you know about numerology at all, or even if you don't, you can just think about 1. What does 1 represent? Ace is 1. So I have 1 rod here, 1 wand. 1 represents a beginning. It represents an initiation, the opening of an energy, the start of something. So really what we have here is a starting of something. And if we think about wands, What did we learn about wands last week? Well, we talked about how wands represents fire. We talked about how wands and fire represents passion and opportunity and growth and intense force and that kind of thing. So we have the initiation. We just plug the things together for now, right? Go from what you know, from what you literally just can observe and acknowledge directly, into the things you don't know. But we start with what we know. So what we know first is that we have one involved. So there's an initiation. And we can think just generally about what one means if we don't need to look this up, though you can. And the wands, we talked about fire. So fire, what does fire feel like? Fire feels like life and passion and vibrancy, that kind of thing. So there's an initiation of some sort of energy. There's a new energy. Start putting these concepts more and more together. Just repeat them, right? Until it coalesces into something. Is that the right verb? It's the one I'm using, so it's right for me. There's an initiation of some sort of force, of some sort of energy. There's a birth of new energy. That's what the Ace of Wands has always meant in my readings. Then after you've spent some time with just interpreting the card from what you can see, I can see the images, I can see the colors, I can think about what colors mean to me, I can think about what these images mean to me, I can think about what this feels like. Then I can think about the tradition and the structure I know, what it means that it's a one, what it means that it's wands. These all tell me things and I don't need to look them up directly, right? I can just trust myself to interpret that way. Then, if you want to take it further, you can start to look at, maybe pull up a few different websites or books and look at how have others interpreted the Ace of Wands. I think if you look this up, I did that for one of the other cards in the reading. I didn't do it for this one. But I think if you look that up, and I do encourage you to do so and write out what's common between them and what's different, I think you'll find that what's common is that this card consistently represents some sort of birth of new energy. So that's a lot, right? That's so much. That's a lot of information. But we really want to make sure we just get the sentiment of it. We want to get the feeling. That's why I'm saying so many words. Get the feeling. Don't try to write down every single thing that someone says. Don't try to keep notes on every single detail of what's in here. Oh, there's this many. There's actually 6 mushrooms, and so what does that mean? Get the feeling. Get the feeling of the card. The tarot is about a story. Tarot is about the imagery. These are really illustrations from a storybook. So get the feeling. That's what you need to take away from any of the cards. So the feeling here that we're getting may be that there's just some birth of new energy. Now, we return to the question, what did we ask about? We said, in the context of this relationship, what do I need to know about passion, new energy? What do I need to know about passion, energy, and opportunity? And this card kind of just comes up and says, well, there's a lot of it. Sometimes it's that simple. There's a lot of it. In this relationship, there's a lot of new energy. There's a lot of new passion. Now, there's 1,000 ways you can interpret that. That can mean maybe someone's feeling a little uncertain. They might say, well, does that mean that there's someone new? Is there someone else I don't know about? Maybe there's a new flame in this relationship that I don't know about. That's possible. This card can definitely come up for that. It might be that the two people involved have found a new passion together. Maybe they've both been finding new parts of themselves separately. There's so many different ways to interpret a card. So the first thing is go through your process, go from what you know, analyze the things that you have here, and just trust what you receive, just trust what you notice, and get the feeling. Then, as you're moving from what you do know, you can move to what you don't know. This is something I don't see other readers do that often. Ask the querent questions. If you're working with someone else, ask them questions. You do not need to know everything. You don't need to know from the cards how many children they have and what day of the week it was when they met. You don't need to, I don't think that in most cases that's what the person is coming to you for. Most of the time the person is coming to work through something emotionally or spiritually. They have questions that they're asking, and they're usually not wanting to spend most of their time having you figure out something they already know. If they spend 45 minutes for you to tell them what day of the week it was when they last put on a red shirt, that's really not the best use of either of your time, right? So ask the things that you can know about directly. Ask them, say, hey, do you know of anyone else who's come into the situation recently, someone that this person in this relationship has taken a lot of interest in? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed them? How much have you noticed them taking interest in passions that they hadn't really given energy to before? Ask questions like that. That can help you get insights. And the thing that's really going to help you piece it all together after you go from what you know, then ask about what you don't know. The thing that's going to pull it all together is the reading as a whole. The cards don't exist independently, and you can read them independently, but where they really come together is reading them in relation to one another. So as you are pulling more cards, they will start to speak to each other and tell you, is it leaning more on the there's someone else side? Is it leaning on the they're very together side? Is it leaning, what direction is it leaning in? The cards will tell you, and your querent can also tell you things. So humble yourself. Remember that your role is to interpret the cards, and it's not a problem to invite someone to do that with you. If they expect you to know everything, then you can reassure them that you don't know everything and you're not trying to know everything. I really make sure I knew that I struggled with that a lot when I first started reading, because someone would say, oh, I'm going through this lately, and I'd say, oh, tell me about what you're feeling and experiencing recently. They would tell me, and then as soon as they stopped talking, I would freeze up. I'd be like, oh, okay, so now I need to start pulling cards. I would start slamming them down on the table and trying to interpret information from them without having set up the questions, the intention behind each of the cards, a spread. I was just putting them down, right? It was a lot of pressure. But another thing is that I expected myself to not be able to ask any questions. If I was a real reader, then I should just know everything. I shouldn't need to ask any questions. But that's a very naive and limiting perspective to take. So don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a collaborative process. So ask the questions about things you don't know so that you too can spend your time figuring out, ask about the things you do know so that you can spend your time together figuring out things that are not yet known. That seems like a great use of energy. So this card's coming up. We return to our question. We go through our process. We say, what do I need to know about passions, energy, and opportunity in this relationship? It says there's a lot of it. There's a birth of new energy. There is a birth of a new force. So there's something new that's coming up that is drawing a lot of energy. That's what this card contributes. And we say, okay, I spent my time going through my process. That's all I'm getting right now. We can move on. So don't feel like you need to have a very specific answer out of every card. They work together. So trust yourself to pull it together with more time and with asking questions. And again, I will reaffirm that if someone's watching right now and they want to offer up a question for me to pull cards on right now, then I would happily do that, and we can interpret them together. And you can keep it kind of vague, you can keep it very specific, whichever way you want to go with it. I just want to help everyone learn here. So that's our first card. We have the Ace of Wands coming up in the fire position, and we've interpreted that by going through our process. Now we're going to go through the same process for the second card, which is, I want to keep it in the same order as how I wrote in the article. So the second card is going to be for what element? Well, we define it as earth. So when we pull this card, we're saying, in the context of the relationship, what do I need to know about resources? What do I need to know about tangible material reality and work, career, effort, those types of things. So we return to the question before pulling the card, and we notice that this card is coming up as a response to that question. So take our time, we get our intention in mind, we prepare ourselves to interpret. And what do we have? Make sure that's the card I intended. We have the Three of Cups. Now we're going to go through the same thing here. What do we notice? We notice there are three people here holding cups. It looks kind of lively, right? It looks a little bit joyous. Um, we notice that they're bringing them together. So it seems like they're like kind of merging. They're kind of coming all together. Um, yeah, that may be what we notice first. Then let's go through some of the other concepts. What do we think about 3 as a number? Maybe if you haven't really felt through numbers or what they mean to you, or maybe they feel like they mean something different. To me, they mean 3. So 1 kind of represents like an individual, like initiation, the start, the beginning, like a single source, right? That's kind of what I think of when I think of 1. When I think about 2, I think of some sort of, you can think about cells dividing even. And I think about 2, I think of duality, and I think about togetherness, but in a very individually focused way. I think about collaboration in that very one-on-one kind of way. Then we move up to 3, and I start to think about it as a collection, a group. And I think of it as a very fluid group. It's just the beginning of a group. It's not like 4, where you start to get a little bit more stability. You have 4, like a square, right? A square is very stable. That's how I go through interpreting the numbers, and numerology supports a lot of what I'm saying and argues with a lot of it. I think it's saying that we disconnected again, but it seems to be back on now, so we're just going to keep going. Sorry about that, y'all. Hopefully it's not too disruptive. I'll check it out afterwards and see about it. But yeah, so 3 kind of is in a place where it looks to me like a group or coming together of like a few different things, the collection, togetherness in that way. That's what I get from it. So that's what I'm noticing here. Cups. What do we know about cups? This is probably the thing that you can most immediately identify with because we talked about it before. If you've been thinking about it, it should come a little bit more easily to you. Just a little bit easier. Cups talks about emotion, talks about all types of watery things, intuitive things, psychic things, feelings, talks about relationships and connection. So this card together, if you look it up, I posted a link in the article to someone talking about this card. And I do suggest that you study what others share, but after you've done your own interpreting. This card is traditionally recognized to mean a coming together to celebrate or appreciate something. So this can represent including others in your process, getting someone else involved. Is this still connected? Yeah, so, okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure it stays connected. This internet gives me so many problems. Yeah, this 3 of Cups really talks about togetherness in feeling. So 3 of Cups, togetherness in feeling is one way that you could interpret that. And so when we go back, we're like, okay, well, what does that even have to do with our question? Because it's even in a different element. How does this work together? Let's go back to the question. Our question is what? Maybe pause here and re-clarify our question if you are engaging that way. Our question was, what do I need to know in the context of this relationship about resources, about work, about effort, and material or tangible reality, the facts? What this says is that there is a togetherness of feeling. This could say that in this relationship, it feels like everyone's working together, that resources are being shared very openly and things are being brought together for everyone to be able to consider all together as one. What I'm kind of getting from this, though, is that when I got this card first, I was interpreting it as a need to get someone else involved. So this really depends. This is where your question comes really important. If I'm saying, what do I need to know, or what do I need to introduce into the situation through Earth? It depends on the question, how you ask. That's why it's so important to know the intention of your question. But the way that I asked emotionally, the way I was feeling when I asked, It's like, what do we need to bring into the situation? And so the way I interpret this is around the stable facts and the work and the effort and the resources in the relationship, there's a need for getting others involved, for togetherness and a group. So especially with this being a cups card, there's a three of pentacles, which is earth, and that I might not interpret that as therapy, but with this being cups and dealing with emotions and feeling, I feel especially inclined to say, well, maybe in this relationship right now is a really great time to get a therapist involved, to get some group counseling, to get someone else to be able to come in and contribute very mindfully, very gently, very sensitively and vulnerably, to be able to contribute to the work that you're doing in this relationship. That's what I would say here. That's what comes to me here. Um, and so that's a second card in our set, and we can come back to pull them all together and say, like, maybe as I have both, this seems more like, oh, there's especially a lot going on right now. There's a lot of energy coming into the relationship. It might be a lot. This might come up as like there's too much energy, there's some conflict, there's a little bit of pushiness and like not knowing about direction. Fire kind of tends to have too much going on. I might be saying that, and this card might be saying, well, to bring it to a more earthy place, what you need to know is about the role of togetherness and feeling. So getting others involved and really feeling together as a group, working together, collaboration, that's what this card is saying is really important. So that's for our second position. And I did have two more cards in this reading here. So we have fire, we have earth, we have air, and then we have water. And I'm thinking we do have two more cards, and I'm thinking that I'm going to give a brief overview, but I want anyone watching to take the time to sit down and interpret these cards further, because it's really important to go through your own process of interpreting before having someone walk you through it all the way. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce these cards very briefly. I'm going to remind us of our process, how we go through interpreting the cards, and then I'm probably going to close this space and leave that space for people to comment below and share their interpretations of what these cards would mean. So let's do that. So what we have here, we had the fire card, we had the earth card. Now we're moving to air, and then we'll be moving into water. So what I'm going to do is pull these cards. We're going to go through our process, okay? And you're going to do this more on your own, but you're not by yourself. You have support. If you have any questions, you can comment it or write me otherwise. But what I want you to do is really think about the same process we've done. So for this card, before we flip it over, we're going to do what? What are we going to do? We're going to talk about what is our question? What's the question we're asking with this position? The question is, if this is an air card, then we could say, for example, what do I need to know about communication? What do I need to know about the role of ideas and thoughts and speech and that kind of thing? What do I need to know about my day-to-day interactions with people and the information and communication that's going on? What do I need to know about that in this relationship? So we clarify our question first. That's the first part of our process. Now we're going to flip the card. Okay, so this is what we're working with. You may not have ever seen this card before. You don't need to. We're going to go through the same thing. We're going to go through, look at the illustration. What does it feel like? What does the illustration feel like? What colors are there? What patterns are there? That kind of thing. What are the expressions? What story does it tell? If this were in a storybook, where would it be positioned? Like, what would it be talking about? What would someone write beside this? That helps me to think about this. So that's where we'd start. Then we're going to think about the numerology. We just talked about a 3. So maybe we can get a similar idea from this 3, and that can help us understand. Then we have pentacles. We've already talked about pentacles as related to a certain element. So I'm not going to tell you, but I'm going to encourage you to stop and think about these and really process them go through this process. Look at the illustrations. Look at the number. Look at the suit, the element, pentacles. What does that mean? What is that associated with? Then maybe go online. Maybe you want to post something without looking online at what other people have written, but maybe after you've interpreted, go online and look at an interpretation of what others have shared about this card traditionally. Then go back to your question. What's our question? In this relationship, what I need to know about communication. Let's just keep it simple. What do I need to know about communication? And this card comes up. And what does it say? That's what I'm asking you. I want you to comment this below. This card comes up. We're asking about communication in the relationship. What do I tell the querent? What does this card tell me to share with them? Remember, this don't just exist alone. So you can think about the first card, you can think about the second card, and now the third card. They're telling a similar story. So you can think about them together. That's one way that can help you interpret these cards. So I want you to do that for this card. Now I'm going to share the last one. If you're getting into a process of interpreting, maybe pause here and go through that before you move on to the next part. Getting ready to show that card. But once you've taken a moment to think about this Three of Pentacles in the air position, we're going to pull a card now for the water position. So 1, 2, 3. The Chariot. So this is going to be a slight bit more of a challenge because it's not a minor arcana card. It's a major arcana card. And you have the article from last week to go through and think about this. You have your process of imagery. Maybe the number will help you here. I don't know. Look into that. And maybe the name can help you know some things. You can look at what other people have said and look at the tradition behind this card. There's lots of resources. So I want you to sit with this card and I want you to think about our question. Our question was for water. Actually, I meant to do that before we pulled it. Hopefully you remember to do that. If not, that's a lesson, right? Think about the question before you show the card. It's just about getting into that practice. And so our question was about water. I'm going to leave the question to you. I really want this to be something that you practice. So take the time. I promise if you do this, you'll have a deeper understanding of the cards and how to interpret, and you will already be well on your way to start being able to do readings for other people. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I am going to ask you to comment that below and share with us. Don't just keep it to yourself. Help others by sharing. Help yourself by sharing, by having that information be accountable. Imagine that I'm the querent, if that's helpful to you. I'm coming to you and I'm asking about a relationship and I need insights. And we've already pulled 2 cards and we've talked about those, but I need you to help me understand the last 2. So go through your process and think about the cards, think about the illustrations, think about the numbers, the element, everything all together. Read about the card online and comment below how this card could help me understand what I need to know about my relationship. And once you've done that, then we can all learn together. And yeah, in the next part of the article, I talked a little bit about how to take things further. So I'm going to leave that also as something that you can comment about, but to think about now that you've sort of built some of these skills as far as how to interpret the cards, how do you imagine yourself using that actually? So are you wanting to do more readings for yourself? Are you trying to start a journal and use the tarot cards to help you reflect on how you're feeling, what you're processing, your experiences every day? Are you wanting to start working with clients and get people coming to you for healing work in that way, to be able to have consultations and guidance in that way? Are you really just looking to learn more about the astrology and the artistic and philosophical tradition of the cards? What is it that you're hoping to do with this practice? So maybe comment that below and share that with everybody as well. The point is, I just want to give you an opportunity to make tarot personal, to use it in your own life, and to be able to keep this art close. This is for you. It's not for me. I've been building my relationship with tarot, but this is an opportunity for you to do something similar in your life and be able to receive healing from tarot. So I really hope that you'll take this as an opportunity to engage with the questions we asked, and to share and really share about your experiences so others can grow in that journey as well. So that's everything we have for today. I'm gonna close up shop here. This is a good time if you have a question to comment it right now in the chat. But either way, what I did want to say is that we are planning to start, what is the date? It's very soon, actually, very, very soon. We're planning to start an online tarot workshop series. So if we get enough signups, then I'll start on the 22nd of this month, August 22nd. And if we don't, then I'll just move the date back until we have enough signups to get everybody into a group. But we have a workshop series which is online, and what this workshop series is, we'll meet for 4 weeks. For 4 weeks, we'll have an online session, which should be an hour and 15 minutes, and we'll do the same types of things that we're doing here, but the difference is it'll be where you can directly, I'm going to keep it as a very small group so we can focus on your learning specifically, and make sure that everybody gets the attention they need and we can all learn together in a very intimate and direct and open, very hands-on way. So we'll go through, in the 4 weeks, we'll go through the same things that I've outlined in these articles, but we'll have the time to go into them in depth and really practice. So we'll talk about, how do I choose the deck? How do I know which one is right for me as a starting deck? We'll talk about the minor arcana in more depth. Use that in readings. We'll talk about the court cards and the major arcana. We'll talk about things like, how do I know if I'm using intuition versus just cold reading the cards? We'll talk about the philosophical background. We'll talk about how tarot began. We're going to talk about all kinds of things, and make sure that you have the skills to start using your tarot in whatever way you want to use it. If you want to start working with clients, we can start getting you towards that immediately, so that tarot can be a source of income and also inspiration for you and others around you. Whatever your intention is, we're here to help you do that, and I will directly be leading that workshop series. So again, it's online. You'll have access to that. Regardless of where you're located, you should, if you can watch this video, then you should have access to that. So yeah, I want to share that with you and make sure that you know about the opportunity. So we're starting on the 22nd, and if not, we'll just push it back by a month or so. And you can find a sign up for that in the description. So I hope that you'll check that out and learn a little bit about what workshop series we're offering and why that could help you grow, and you'll sign up. And if you have any questions, please just comment down below. And yeah, it's a lot of words, but I guess I just want to close with saying that I am so thankful that you've come to spend time with me today and spend time with yourself, and make sure to honor an opportunity to learn. This is really a beautiful opportunity to learn, so I thank you for doing that for yourself and helping to bring more clarity and healing and reflection and softness into the world. Y'all know I'm about softness. So yeah, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please make sure to like this video, to share this video with someone that you think might be interested in learning tarot, and to subscribe so that you can get more updates when we have future content. But with that, I would just say, with love and light, Amani. Thank you so much for time with me. All right.